The name itself conjures a powerful image, a single continuous caravan route, a golden thread stretching thousands of miles from the heart of China to the shores of the Mediterranean. We picture camels laden with shimmering silk, brave merchants like Marco Polo traversing treacherous deserts, and a simple, glorious exchange between East and West. But this romantic vision, the very concept of the Silk Road, is almost entirely a modern myth. The truth is far more complex, chaotic, and consequential. The Silk Road was never one road, but a messy, shifting web of unmarked paths, mountain passes, and sea lanes. Silk was not its only cargo. In fact, the most world-changing things it carried were invisible, and few, if any, merchants ever traveled its entire length. The real story is a hidden history of forgotten middlemen, lost cultures, and the unseen transmission of ideas, faiths, and plagues that fundamentally shaped the modern world. This is the story of the Silk Road as it actually was. Not a road, but the world's first great network of globalization. One of the greatest secrets of the Silk Road is that no one who lived and worked along its routes had ever heard of it. The term Silk Road, or Seidenstraße, was coined in 1877 by a German geographer, Baron Ferdinand von Richthofen. It was a convenient academic label that captured the Western fascination with Chinese silk, but it imposed a simple, linear order on what was, in reality, a highly decentralized and fragmented system. For over 1,000 years, there was no single well-traveled highway connecting Rome and China. Instead, there was a sprawling network of drifting trails, a patchwork of paths that ebbed and flowed with the rise and fall of empires, the shifting of desert sands, and the constant threat of bandits. A merchant setting out from the ancient Chinese capital of Chang'an would not have been embarking on a journey to Europe. They would have been traveling to the next oasis city, perhaps Dunhuang, where they would sell their goods to another trader, who might then travel on to Samarkand. This was a trade built on middlemen. Goods changed hands dozens of times, their prices increasing with every transaction. A bolt of Chinese silk that reached the Roman Empire was astronomically expensive, precisely because it had passed through so many hands, Persian, Sogdian, Indian, and Arab merchants all taking their cut. Furthermore, the overland routes, for all their fame, were dwarfed by the maritime trade. Sea routes across the Indian Ocean, dictated by the monsoon winds, could carry hundreds of times more cargo, more safely and cheaply than any camel caravan. The true economic engine of Eurasian trade was not the camel, but the dhow. While silk gave the network its name, the idea that it was the only significant commodity is another pervasive myth. Silk was the ultimate luxury good, so prized in Rome that the Senate tried to ban men from wearing it, deeming the fabric a symbol of decadence. But the Silk Road was a two-way street, a bustling marketplace of countless goods. From the west, China imported coveted war horses from the Fergana Valley, Roman glassware that was more precious than gold, and exotic materials like ivory and coral. From the east came not only silk, but also furs, ceramics, lacquer, and jade. In fact, the earliest routes across the Tarim Basin were not for silk at all, but for jade from the mines of Khotan, a trade that predated the silk commerce by millennia. Spices from the East Indies, medicines and perfumes all flowed in both directions. Perhaps most consequentially, the Silk Road was the conduit for transformative technologies. Two of China's 4 great inventions made their way west along these routes. The knowledge of papermaking traveled from China to the Islamic world in the 8th century, eventually reaching Europe and fueling the Renaissance. Gunpowder, first developed in China as an alchemical elixir, was exported west, where it was refined and weaponized, forever changing the face of warfare. The Silk Road was not just a marketplace for luxuries, it was a pipeline for the very technologies that would reshape civilizations. If the Silk Road wasn't a single road, and its merchants didn't travel its full length, then who were the people who made it all work? The hidden heroes of this story were the middlemen, and none were more important than the Sogdians. Originating from the region around modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, the Sogdians were the undisputed masters of Central Asian trade for nearly 1,000 years. They were a society built on commerce. Mobile, multilingual, and culturally adaptable, they established trading colonies from Persia all the way into the heart of China. Their language became the lingua franca of the Silk Road, the common tongue of business spoken in every oasis and marketplace. They were not just traders, they were skilled artisans producing exquisite metalwork and textiles. They were also diplomats and translators, serving as the crucial link between disparate empires. The Sogdians were often called cultural bees, and for good reason. As they traveled, they didn't just carry goods, they absorbed and transmitted ideas, fashions, and faiths. They were instrumental in translating Buddhist scriptures from Sanskrit into Chinese and played a key role in spreading not only Buddhism, but also Nestorian Christianity and Manichaeism eastward. The rich multicultural tapestry of the Silk Road was woven in large part by Sogdian hands. The most profound exchanges along the Silk Road were often invisible. The network was a conduit for ideas that would reshape the spiritual and intellectual landscape of the world. Buddhism, born in India, traveled north into Central Asia and then east into China, carried by merchants and missionaries. The Mahayana school of Buddhism, which would become dominant in East Asia, was likely shaped by the cultural crosscurrents it encountered in the oasis cities of the Silk Road. Later, Nestorian Christianity and Manichaeism followed the same paths, finding converts among the Sogdians and Turks before reaching the Chinese imperial court. Islam too spread along these routes, carried by Arab merchants who settled in distant lands like the Korean peninsula. But this unprecedented connectivity had a dark side. Just as the Silk Road carried salvation, it also carried sickness. It was the world's first superhighway for pandemics. Diseases that were endemic in one population could now travel with merchants and their goods to infect immunologically naive populations thousands of miles away. Smallpox, which may have originated in Egypt, spread to India, and then via the Silk Road exploded into China, Japan, and Korea in the 6th and 7th centuries, with one outbreak in Japan killing up to a third of the population. Most devastatingly, the Silk Road was the primary vector for the Black Death. The plague bacteria, Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas on rodents, traveled in the grain sacks and textiles of caravans, spreading from Central Asia to the Middle East, and finally arriving in European ports in 1346, where it would kill up to half the continent's population. The network that had brought the world closer together also made it catastrophically vulnerable. For centuries, much of the Silk Road's true history lay buried beneath the desert sands until a series of stunning archaeological discoveries in the early 20th century began to reveal its secrets. In the Tarim Basin of western China, explorers uncovered hundreds of naturally preserved bodies, some over 4,000 years old. These were not the ancestors of the Han Chinese, but people with Caucasian features, tall with red, blonde, or brown hair, wearing intricately woven woolen textiles, including tartan patterns reminiscent of Celtic designs. These Tarim mummies were likely descendants of Indo-European migrations, a lost people who settled the area long before the Silk Road's peak, challenging the traditional narrative of the region's history. Even more revelatory was the discovery made in 1900 by a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu at the Mogao Caves near the oasis city of Dunhuang. He stumbled upon a hidden, sealed-off chamber, the library cave, packed solid with nearly 60,000 manuscripts, paintings, and printed documents dating from the 4th to the 11th centuries. It was an accidental time capsule of life on the Silk Road. The texts were written in over 15 languages, including Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and Sogdian. They included not just Buddhist sutras, but also business contracts, medical texts, poems, and even a contract for the sale of a slave. The Dunhuang manuscripts provided an unprecedented, unfiltered glimpse into the vibrant, multicultural, and deeply interconnected world that the Silk Road had created. The Silk Road was never the simple line on a map that we imagine. It was a living, breathing network that connected dozens of cultures not through a single grand highway, but through a million small local interactions. Its true legacy is not found in the silk that reached Rome, but in the invisible cargo it carried. It was a network that transmitted faiths that now count billions of followers, technologies that ended the medieval era, and diseases that wiped out empires. The hidden history of the Silk Road reveals that global connection has always been a double-edged sword, bringing both enlightenment and plague, prosperity and peril. As we build our own global Silk Roads of information, trade, and travel today, it forces us to ask a critical question. Have we learned how to embrace the profound benefits of exchange without succumbing to the hidden dangers that inevitably travel alongside them?